Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Southside Beat here on the DK Pittsburgh Sports Steelers YouTube channel and podcasting network. Chris Halicke here, Matt Williamson. Southside Beat is back. Matt, what's going on, my friend? How you doing?
Yeah, I just saw you a couple days ago. We had a good visit in Florida. Things went well down there. Still waiting on a certain quarterback to make his mind up, but it is really draft season, and we got pre-draft visits. Pro days are wrapping up here. So we're getting to that point where teams are really buckling down and building their board.
Kyle coming in saying, I love these guys. Always excited for the Southside Beat. We appreciate you, Kyle. Thank you very much.
I think this podcast is picking up steam. A lot of people brought it up to me lately.
I am very, very happy about that. We just want to talk football with you guys, and that's what it's about. No fluff, just football. So yeah, I that is the one thing about this time of year. Once the annual meeting or the owners' meetings, whatever you want to call them, once they're done, this is a heavy foot on the gas pedal toward the draft. I wouldn't expect to see many, or if any, free agent signings. If there are any, they will be very insignificant, most likely.
Yeah,
it's got to be a really good contract or a really good deal in order for something to get done. And why is that? Well, because if you wait until the Monday after the draft to sign a guy, they don't factor into the compensatory pick formula for next year. And right now the Steelers are projected to get the maximum of 4 compensatory picks. And so if they wait until after the draft to sign anybody, especially if anybody of significance, it really looks like they're going to be getting 4 compensatory picks next year. And that right now is a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th. And it could be even multiple thirds if Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields hit certain incentives or playing time or salary achievements or whatever it is. So that is why from between now and the draft, which is only 3 weeks from tonight, by the way.
I know. How about it?
It's crazy how fast the draft is coming up. Yeah, it's that's why one of the reasons why you'll see free agency go a little cold, not just here with the Steelers, but throughout the league.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify this because some people have asked me over and over, which I'm not sure, not everyone understands the comp pick game. But if they sign Aaron Rodgers to a massive contract 5 minutes from now, it does not change that at all, by the way, folks. I just want you got to be clear, because much like Darius Slay, he was never a true UFA. He was cut. So the equation doesn't account for those guys. So there's more value to adding those players, which is part of why the Steelers are getting good at this.
Yes, that is the big thing that keeps coming up too, for me. Yeah, any player who is not does not reach the end of their contract and become a free agent that way does not factor into the formula. So any player that, like you said, was cut, they don't factor in. You can sign 18 of them.
Yep. Oh, that means nothing. Right.
It means nothing. So that
everybody they lost was a contract was up. Najee's contract was up. Daniel's contract was up. So you're getting picks back for those.
Yeah.
So it's a great game. It's a great game if you can play it well.
It is, and I did see one thing on the comp picks really quick. I did see one person kind of respond and be like, you guys talk about using the comp picks to move up in next year's draft, and you're not going to be able to throw, even if you were to get the maximum and have 4 third-round picks, you're not going to be able to throw 4 third-round picks at somebody to go move up, 15 spots in the first round. And that's not what the comp picks exactly do. What it does is it gives you just any and all ammunition you possibly need to go get whoever you want. Yeah, if you're going to trade up like the way the Chiefs did to go get Patrick Mahomes, you're going to have to give up a first-round pick. You're that's just the most likely scenario. But
if first, you're talking
right. Yeah, a future first, like they did. But if you do that and give up maybe just one other third in the current draft, you've still got how many other picks in that current draft?
Right.
You got your quarterback, plus you'll have all these other picks to get your big draft haul. And that's one of the main reasons why the comp pick game helps when it comes to go getting that quarterback.
So real quick, Chris, I talk about this a lot over the years. Everyone's kind of familiar with like the Jimmy Johnson trade charts and all the, every pick has value.
Yeah.
Yes, but 32 7th-round picks isn't better than a 2nd-round pick. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like 100 pennies equals $1. It's
right. Yeah, that is true. But again, if you go into next year's draft, let's just throw a hypothetical out there, and you've got 3 third-round picks.
Yeah.
And you want to go get your guy, and you have to give up, let's just say the Chiefs had to give up to go get Mahomes, a future first and the current third, like one current third-round pick. You will get your quarterback in the first round. Then you still got a second, you still got 2/3, you still got a fourth, actually 2/4 because, or whatever it is, you still got a whole bunch of picks in that draft. So it's a great thing for the Steelers to do, because if you do have to give up picks, which you will, to go get a quarterback, you want to still have some picks in the draft. That's one of the reasons why I think today when the Cowboys got Joe Milton for a 5th-round pick, people are like, well, why did the Steelers give that up? Well, because if they did, they would have only had 3 picks in the first 5 rounds in this draft. Like,
right.
That's
they're
not a lot
right now, right?
Yeah. So having draft capital always helps when you talk about wanting to go get somebody.
Last thing on this, and we can keep moving on, but
yeah,
even the Chiefs that year with Mahomes, that was their number one goal. They accomplished it, but they probably still needed a guard or a safety or something. I mean, like you're not going to go into the draft without any other needs except just a quarterback and trade your Ricky Williams your draft for Mahomes. You still need other things to fill in gaps. You have other guys leaving in free agency, and in your scenario, let's say you trade your first, your third. Still have 2/3, trade a future first. Well, when the 3rd round rolls around, you might have made 2 picks, your 2nd and 3rd. You trade that 3rd for a future 2nd, and you go into next year's draft without a first, but you got 2 2s, So there's a lot of ways to build the puzzle, obviously.
Yeah, and they're again, just the more draft capital you have, the more flexibility you have, the more you can do to add to the roster. Yeah, there's just so many different things that you can do. So having all these picks will be great. So we're going to take a quick break, but then we're going to get to a few of your questions that I've already kind of earmarked here. And we're just going to try to talk as much draft as possible. But if you guys want to come in and bring your questions, you're more than welcome to do that too. So we're going to, like I said, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back right after this.
At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects.
Welcome back to the Southside Beat. Chris and Matt here. We are, like I said, 3 weeks away from the draft. It's crazy. Brent comes in and he asks, Matt, could you comment on the pre-draft visits we had today? Now, just to give those names, Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas, Caleb Johnson, the running back out of Iowa, Bartholomew, the tight end from Pitt, who does not count toward the 30. And then who was Azariah Thomas, the cornerback from Florida State. What are your thoughts on those guys?
Start with Bartholomew. If you live within X amount of miles, it's free. They brought the Pitt kicker in too. It doesn't mean they're going to cut Boswell. But you might as well do your homework on those guys. Maybe he's even your 7th-round pick. He's not a bad player. He's going to get drafted most likely. Golden's the best player of the group, and he would cost you the 21st overall pick. I mean, to me, I can't imagine how they would do that. That would be a remarkable trio of Pickens, Metcalf, and Golden, who's my number 1 receiver, not by leaps and bounds, but he's number 1. I would think the only way that goes down is a Pickens trade. I mean, if you move Pickens for a 2nd or whatever, you take Golden at 21. I could understand that build and would understand, and that would be, you want to have all your homework done with him. I like Thomas quite a bit. I look at him as a high quality number 2 corner.
Yep.
You have Slay, but another corner wouldn't break my heart, obviously. Slay's probably a 1-year rental. Thomas didn't run well. He's not super fast, but his length makes up for it. He's a man-to-man coverage corner, which is the hardest thing to find. So without a second-round pick, I don't know how you would land him. He'd have to fall to the third, but who knows where their picks end up when it's all said and done. And Johnson's the last one. He's my running back 5 behind the 2 top studs and the Ohio State guys. Okay. Had a really good year. You could comment on this maybe even more than me, but highly accomplished outside zone runner that fits the scheme. And running backs could fall. He could be your 3rd-round pick. He has some physicality to him too. A little bit more of a banger than some of the speed guys they brought in, the Sampsons and Tutons,
Yeah, he's definitely more of a big guy, but he's light on his feet. Like, reminds me of Jerome Bettis in that way. Like, Jerome Bettis, obviously, like probably the best power back of all time because of how light on his feet he was.
Crazy, yeah.
He could dance between the tackles and then put a foot in the ground and run somebody over. Caleb Johnson's not quite that guy, but he balances having a big body and being able to be physical with being light on his feet, being able to be a one-cut guy. I like him a lot. I think for me, he's my RB4. I like him more. I like him more than Henderson, not because I know Henderson's a more accomplished 3rd down guy. Like, he's more accomplished in pass protection and a lot of the little things. But in terms of upside of just being a pure runner, I like Caleb Johnson more.
I think it handled more of a workload too.
Right. And so I think that'd be a great pick for the Steelers if they could somehow get him, whether it be getting back into the 2nd round or if he were to fall to the 3rd round. If he's there at 83, I don't even care who else is on the board. He'd be the best player available, in my opinion.
Probably. I wouldn't fight you on that either.
Yeah. So I don't think he'll be there at 83. But yeah, I like, and the one thing I wanted to bring up about Golden, because we had a commenter on DKPittsburghSports.com. I think it was today when I just reported the pre-draft visits, and somebody was like, I still want them to get a defensive tackle in the 1st round, and I'm like, I agree with that, but what if Derek Harmon's gone, Kenneth Grant's gone, Walter Nolan's gone, and the best defensive tackle on the board is Darius Alexander, but Matthew Golden's still there? Like,
you're going to have a higher grade on Golden than Alexander.
That's what I'm thinking, because I think the best defensive tackle at that point would be either Alexander or Sanders, unless there's somebody else who you like more than either one of those guys.
There's 2 I like better, and we could, we're splitting hairs, and it's kind of eye of the beholder. But I'll take. Why am I blanking on both their names? Texas and Ohio State.
Oh, Alfred Collins,
and
Tyler Williams.
Williams. I'm really warming up to both those guys to quite a bit. And we all sit here and say, oh, all 3 of those D tackles that you mentioned, maybe they're gone, and maybe they are. Maybe they only like 2 of them. We just assume they like all 3 because we haven't met the kids or know the exact fit. I mean, they may only be interested in 2 of the 3.
Yeah.
Or down to 27 and you can't believe Golden's still there and you have a 2nd-round pick and you take your tackle there. You got to explore all these options.
Yep. And that's the big thing, because you have to prepare for the scenarios in which, yes, we want a defensive tackle. Like, we want to get one of those guys, but if all of them are gone and the best player available is Matthew Golden, we need to know everything about him. We didn't know if he's worth taking.
It'd be very useful.
Very. And honestly, that is with or without George Pickens on the roster. I actually think Matthew Golden would be a great complement to DK Metcalf.
And I'm sure you could convince Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith to play more 11 personnel if that's he would just sit there doing nothing.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. I like Matthew Golden. He's one of my favorite guys in the draft. I think my player comp for him is Santonio Holmes. I just think
good one.
He's a similar size, similar speed. He's actually, I think, faster than Holmes was. The start-stop ability is crazy. I like him a lot. And if he were to turn into that, then home run.
It's funny. I was talking about him on my Peacock and Williamson podcast today.
Yeah.
And he ran the fastest time, and I'm not implying that he's slow, but speed to me isn't even his best asset. I mean, he's not like Tyreek Hill or Metcalf speed. I mean, he plays fast, but Worthy played faster. I think Bond even plays faster at Texas. It's the start-stop stuff. It's the out of the breaks. I mean, you mentioned Santonio, but think of a Antonio Brown version. You know, I mean, obviously that's the Cadillac. I mean, that's the Lamborghini version, but he's more that style than just a burner.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Brian here says, I think we should trade back and get a second-round pick back, or just get a second-round pick and draft 2 defensive line guys, give us a dominant front like Philly. Matt, I think this is right up your alley. What you've been saying. Like, it's just load up on defensive line.
Yeah, it wouldn't break my heart if you can't trade. Trading back's easy to say. I mean, I don't know exactly what players people would be calling you for. Who do you want to be on the board at 21? I mean, part of me thinks maybe you could have a run of edge defenders, and all of a sudden it's starting to get lean, and people that were late, that thought they would get a great edge player can't. Maybe somebody wants Dart. I don't know, whatever. But if you can get out of 21 and recoup day 2 collateral, it doesn't even have to be a round 2 pick, but just more day 2 picks.
Yeah,
I am all for it. But even if you don't, if they stick and pick with every pick they have right now and can't move and don't try to move, and their first 2 picks for D linemen, I would totally understand it, and I would not have a hard time with it at all.
Charlie here says, if we draft back, do you think it would be a 50-50 role, or do you think Warren will get a bigger workload this year? I hope he does. I do think Jalen gets a bigger workload. I mean, both. I mean, Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan were both asked about him, and I do think that he will be the 1A. Like that
probably no matter what.
Yeah, no matter what. I mean, unless somehow, for whatever reason, the Steelers wound up, and again, somehow, and went up with Ashton Genty at running back.
Sure.
I mean,
or probably Hampton.
Yeah.
Right.
But Jalen Warren's going to be in line to be the 1A. Now, the way Tomlin spoke about not just Kenny Gainwell, but also the draft, I do think that if they take a running back in the first 2 days of the draft, and that could be, like I said, Caleb Johnson could be one of the Ohio State guys.
Interesting conversation, right?
Yeah, you're talking about that guy. I mean, even like Travion Henderson is a good example from Ohio State. Really, really good really good athlete, really good runner, but also good in pass protection. Already accomplished in that way. That's a guy who's going to be able to get snaps right away. Caleb Johnson won't, because he's terrible in pass protection right now. He will need to get work. He cannot be out on the field on third down unless he's just going out for a pass. Because you can't run. I mean, and even then it's a risk, because if you have to change protection and put max protect on, he's not going to be able to stop anybody because he's not good in pass protection yet. You can be coached. He can, get there eventually. But right away,
every rookie has to prove that it takes a lot of trust for coaches to trust you in protection, because it's so much harder. And all these guys were big fish in small ponds. I'm not going to ask them to pass block, because I want them running routes, because they're the best athletes out there. And Chris, another thing I noticed, and I kind of blame NIL for this stuff, is this class as a whole, Henderson aside, bad pass blocking backs and awful run blocking receivers. I think there's a little bit more diva. I mean, I got millions in the bank. I'm not doing that stuff anymore like I used to in college.
Yeah. Yeah. The one I will say about Golden, though, he's not a great blocker, but he's a willing blocker. And you can't teach that.
Good enough. Right.
Yeah. I mean, the fact is, like, if you already have a guy who's willing to stick his nose pretty much up against anybody,
that's most of the battle.
Yeah. Because
he doesn't have to be Hines Ward, right?
No, but then you can coach him. You can coach him good technique, good ways to become a better blocker, and then you take a willing blocker and you make him into a really, really good blocker. Again,
but
I think
always what keeps rookies off the field is protection and fumbles. Just prove to me that you can do those things. Back to the original question, though, I probably would put a chip down right now that Warren ends up with the most rushing yards on the team. I mean, they'd have to draft one pretty high for me to change my opinion.
Yeah, Hampton might be the only one. Yeah.
He might be the only one, or maybe Johnson. By the just he's a little more physical. He's a bigger body guy. Yeah. Judkins, maybe somebody like that. But if it's a 4th or later, if it's Tootin, Martinez, or somebody like that, I definitely think it'll be Warren. And don't forget, I mean, it was you don't remember better than me. The first month or so of the season, Warren wasn't himself.
He was coming off an injury. He was not. Yeah, he was not himself. He definitely needed to recover from that. He was not quite there yet. Denny here asks, are we better off trying to find a late running back in the draft or sign a Dobbins or a Chubb? You've mentioned possibly adding, a guy like Dobbins so that if you wanted to load up on defensive tackle, you could do it. Now adding J.K. Dobbins before the draft,
these are all after draft stuff, probably, right?
Yeah, I mean, now you could do it, but
it's not an inspiring name. But another one I've thrown out there is Gus Edwards. Let's say you draft Sampson or some smaller guy. I can get Gus Edwards for league minimum to be my goal line, wear you down guy. It's not inspiring, but it's cheap as could be, And Dobbins is the one that excites me just because I think he's really good at football, and I know he has durability problems, but when he was healthy, he was great. Chubb's a whole different beast. None of these guys play special teams, of course, but I wouldn't mind having 4 legit guys in camp,
Yeah, absolutely.
NFL players, a rookie in addition to those guys,
Yeah, of course. I mean, and it's not like, Kenneth Gainwell's contract is so big that you have to make him. I mean, if you just look out in the draft and you were to also add, J.K. Dobbins to the mix because you can get him on a Kenneth Gainwell type contract.
That's what I mean. He's cheap and he seems like I'd rather have Dobbins than Gainwell.
Yeah, no, I would too.
Right.
But
Gainwell's not exactly Walter Payton, I mean, like the world would go on without him, right?
Yeah. But I do think, Gainwell at least provides, the ability to also return kicks.
Yeah. I think it's a good addition. It's just not a world moving addition.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Enough prohibitive to another move.
Enough to get Cordero Patterson off the roster.
That needs to happen.
Yeah.
I think. Why isn't it yet? Is it? I mean, I guess they just haven't had to. Maybe it's back. Maybe Rodgers' contract will force that, or who knows?
Possibly, or just because. I mean, they don't really have to right now. I mean, right now they have 3 running backs on the roster. Well, I mean, not counting any guys who are on futures contracts, but 3 guys who project to be the 3 guys on the 53. Yeah. Because they brought back what's his name, Jonathan Ward. They brought him back on a futures deal, but I mean, we're talking he's not going to be in your top 3
practice squad guy.
Yeah. So I think we're let's get some more comments or some more questions. If you guys have them, bring them. Yeah. So when we talk about getting back into day 2, I think we talked about this a little bit last time. You don't necessarily have to get a second round pick if you can get another 3rd.
Sure.
I like the idea of
more draft capital.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about, okay, well, if you want to trade back, 4 spots and it just gets you, something else, where you can go get another guy. I do think that helps out quite a bit. You can still get one of your guys in the first round. I think that's with the number of second round or late second, early third round guys that have come in for pre-draft visits, I'm starting to become more and more convinced that the Steelers are going to be considering any kind of move to get another pick on day 2.
I also think it's a sweet spot of this draft overall.
Yes.
Like pound for pound, what it costs you, I'd rather make day 2 picks than day 1 picks. There's a lot of non-first rounders that are going to go in the first round this year. Just takes 2 to tango. It's easy to say. And Chris, I say this all the time too. People get so caught up in second round pick, a third round pick. You got to get back in the second round. GMs don't think that way. They look at it like pick 42, pick 72. They don't care what round it's in. It's what pick overall. The round thing is it's kind of like, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, if you can get pick 75 in the draft, I mean, then all of a sudden you've got 75 and 83.
Yeah.
I mean, it just it
only
depends.
Costs you 3 spots or whatever, right?
Right. Yeah, it depends on. It depends on a lot of different things, and like GMs don't think that way.
I have to get a round 2 pick. No,
right.
Yeah,
right. Russell brings up a good question that is definitely going to be more up your alley. Says, Matt, when evaluating prospects, how do you balance raw talent versus scheme fit? Have you ever had to pass on a highly talented player because they didn't fit the system?
Yes, but I would say the league is doing a better job of that than ever. So the most glaring example that'll hit home is the LeBeau 3-4. They used to benefit so much because nobody wanted Joey Porter and Gilden, like those type of dudes. You could get in the third round. They were too small to be a 4-3 end. There's only like 3 teams in the league running that scheme at the time. Not many teams were in the Wilfork Hampton mold. They didn't have a use for a pure nose. They wanted a 1 technique, a 3 technique. Not a lot of people wanted Brett Kiesel, a big, long 3-4 end. And the league has changed so dramatically now. I mean, like 3-4 versus 4-3 is almost out the window because almost everyone's in nickel and people have gotten better. But in a way, it's a little before probably your time, but like when Warren Sapp was coming out, he was
I remember that.
Of course.
I was a kid, but yeah.
Yeah, but he was an elite 3 technique.
Yeah.
Prospect coming out of the U. LeBeau wouldn't have wanted him. You know, I mean, if you happened to be on the clock and he was your highest graded guy, I don't think they would have picked him. You know what I mean? So yes, it's less the case now than then, though.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I think the way that even Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan talked about Keanu Benton this week, talked about his versatility, talked about the way that he can move to different spots on the defensive line, playing multiple techniques, doing different things. It's because the Steelers, number one, don't operate in their base 3-4 the majority of the time. They're in their nickel most of the time. And when they're in their nickel, they've got 2. It operates more like a 4-3 than it does a 3-4 because they've got 2 interior defensive linemen, down. Then you have the 2 edge rushers. So you got 4 up front. Now you got 2 linebackers and you have 5 defensive backs. So when they are in that package, you need to have a guy who can play a 3 tech, and he might have to shift over, and maybe he can be in a more traditional 5 tech if he's a 3-4 defensive end. But he has to be able, no matter what, that guy has to be able to play. He has to be able to be disruptive in the B gap. He has to be able to take on double teams in the A gap sometimes. He has to be able to do different things up front. And I think because of that versatility, it does kind of impact that. At least I do know. I obviously haven't ever been a scout or anything, but you just the way the game's going, you have to know that these guys have to be versatile up front.
Like if they draft Kenneth Grant at 21, he's not just going to line up head up over the center and 2 gap all day long.
All the time,
never. I mean, like rarely even. And back to like LeBeau. Ogunjobi by no means is Warren Sapp, but they're both 3 technique upfield guys. Like LeBeau wouldn't have wanted Ogunjobi. He wouldn't have been a Steeler then. He's not tall enough to ride the ride. He's not 6'4.5" or long.
I love it. Who is probably okay? I got a question for you. Who's the most versatile defensive player up front from pre-2010 that could play in today's NFL?
Anywhere in the league, you mean?
Or no, just on the Steelers.
Oh, Steelers stuff. Ooh.
Like Aaron Smith. Like, how would he do?
That's interesting because they're really pigeonholed more.
Yeah.
Like, this is a weird conversation, but they won the Super Bowl the one year, picked 32nd, and they took is that his first name? Hood. The defensive tackle. Ziggy Hood.
Yeah.
And I immediately thought, that's not a Steeler. And he had a decent career when he left here, but he wasn't a 3-4 player. He was a 4-3 penetrator that I think they just kind of decided we're taking a D lineman, even though he's not really a fit for us, and he never really was.
Yeah.
I don't have a great answer for that, though, because, boy, for that era, you were either a nose or you were an end, and now they call them D tackles, as they should, and edges, because you're not just a nose, you're not just an end. And even like Collins and Grant, some of these, just because you're 335 pounds, they might be as much the end here as they are nose. I mean, because they want the length to fight offensive tackles. You know what I mean? Like, Halicke Williams is a nose. I mean, he's not going to battle with tackles very often. But I know that when we do a lot of these mocks and they end up with two defensive linemen, like, aren't they both kind of nose-ish, or both they both kind of D-end-ish? I'm like, I don't know that it matters as much anymore now, especially because Benton can do both. Cam's lined up on the nose. You know, like, there's just so much movement. It's week to week.
It is. And because, I mean, Keanu Benton played nose at Wisconsin, but he is definitely more of a 3 or a 5.
Yes.
I mean, that's just his game. He's a more polished pass rusher. He's just built more like a 3 or a 5 in today's game.
Mm-hmm. And if you draft a nose, you might get better 2 spots.
Oh, 100%.
100%. I mean, that's the plan.
You get Kenneth Grant in the first round. I mean, that to me is your 3-4. You've got Kenneth Grant at the nose, and you've got Hayward and Benton as your 2 5s.
I mean, even if it's West or Phillips or Caldwell in round 3-4, you know, that's a nose that's not going to play 5, you know, and Benton will then.
Yeah. One final question. We've answered this before, but we want to wrap up with a question, and then we gotta run. Tanya asked, besides trading George Pickens, which I don't think is a good plan, aka last year, you don't want to have just one number 1 guy. How do you get back into the second round? I mean, again, this has been kind of the, like, what are the options? I know we've talked about it before. Trading back is probably the most or the easiest way to do that. But is there any other possible option out there other than trading back in the first round?
That's the obvious one. You could trade future picks, but I am not interested in trading my first or second by any stretch.
No.
You can convince me to get rid of next year's third, knowing that there's more thirds on the way. But next year's third probably yields you a this year fourth. You know, you're not going to get a second this year for a third next year. I mean, that's obviously not going to work.
Yeah.
And I'm with you on Pickens, but I would understand a draft build where the 21st pick rolls around, Golden is sitting there. There's a wealth of defensive linemen still on the board. They've hardly been touched. You take Golden. You've got this plan in place where Pickens goes immediately the second after you make the pick for a mid-second rounder to whoever, and the Chargers. I don't know who, pick someone you want. And okay, you swapped, you got a little younger, you swapped out the contract situation. Pickens becomes Golden. It costs you about a round to do it, and you still have the same number of picks and go D-line in round 2 and 3. You know, like, I would kind of understand that too, but I think Pickens won't get traded.
I am leaning more that way now that Pickens won't get traded. I am curious to see, though, because the one thing that can always change that is for one team to sweep you off your feet.
That's the thing. There's a real shortage in the league of prototypical X receivers, which is a big reason they got Metcalf. I mean, that's the at the line of scrimmage dude, and there's a shortage of them. Someone might lose out on Ted McMillan and say, we're going to give you too much for Pickens, and that's why Golden's in town today. You know what I mean?
That's exactly why, because because if you have a situation in which you get to 21 overall and Matthew Golden's still there, and you got one team who's like, if you guys want to take Matthew Golden, or if you take Matthew Golden, we are willing to offer,
or no matter what, we'll give you our second, no matter what, or whatever.
We'll give you our second straight up for George Pickens,
maybe so that you second and a fifth, or, you know,
right? It's just more than you ever expected to get for Pickens, and maybe you just go ahead and pull the trigger.
We're desperate for a receiver. We've been there. You've been on the other side of it. You know, right? Yeah, right.
Teams can get desperate, and when teams get desperate, you take advantage of it, because you end up getting way more than you should for certain. Chicago, Chase Claypool, great example of that. Yeah, Chicago was desperate for a receiver. They got one. They gave up a second round pick to get him, and the Steelers took advantage of it. They were like, okay, well, we're 2-6, but we don't mind parting with him anyway, and they turned that second round pick into Joey Porter Jr. So,
like, this isn't the craziest thing either. They take Golden at 21. Thursday goes by, and that's all that's happened. Okay, Golden's the only Steeler. They haven't moved anybody else. And Tennessee is they're second on the clock for Friday's draft. They just took Cam Ward. He's got nobody to throw to. Hey, do you want the second pick on day 2 for Pickens? Yes, I do. Yeah. And I'm going to take maybe Walter Nolan.
Yeah.
You know what
Absolutely. I mean? Yeah. You never know what's going to happen.
Not
And that's why you do your homework. That's why Matthew Golden came in for, like you said, for a pre-draft visit.
They like
and also met with him at the combine. I mean, they've double dipped on this guy now. And I
if they go big, it's the only one they'll go big on to me.
I think so too. I don't
Ibuka, no.
I think they like Ibuka, but I think of all the receivers that are possibly going to be within their range, Golden's the one that they really like.
Yeah.
And for good reason. Like again,
they may have a top 10 grade on him, and if
Mm-hmm.
he's a 21, it's like I don't know how you pass on him. That I would understand.
Right. And that's the thing, because you could be thinking we want defensive tackle all day long,
and you still will get one.
Possibly, yeah, especially in this draft. I mean, you don't have to go. You would really like to get one of those top guys, but you don't have to go get one in the first round. You don't have to, because there will be good ones available in the third round.
It's
maybe not
my
guys.
favorite way of building, but I would sure like Golden to be a Steeler.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. We went a couple minutes over time, but that's all right. We'll be back next week. We'll continue to talk draft stuff. Maybe we'll talk about Aaron Rodgers officially being a Steeler. Maybe not. Who knows at this point? But either way, we are going to be next week, yet another week closer to the draft. I'm excited about it. 3 weeks from tonight. It's amazing. Can't believe it's already about to be here. So, we'll catch you guys on the flippity flip. We'll see you later.